Hey everybody, it's Pastor Matthew Best from St. Stephen Lutheran Church. Hope you're doing well. You can find us on the web at ststephenlc.org. You can also find more of my own work at pastormatthewbest.com. So it's time for Tough Topic Tuesday. And our tough topic today is, how do you have a conversation with somebody that you disagree with? And maybe disagree might be a little bit light. This comes from a conversation that I was having. We have something called Tapology that we do with a couple of other churches. And the Tapology is a free-flowing conversation over some drinks and some food. And we were having a conversation about how do you have a conversation with somebody that you know you're going to disagree with, somebody who maybe has a different political bent or a different religious bent, or maybe if it's at sports, whatever. These could be people that you know really well. They could be family members. They could be strangers on the street. They could be people you work with, go to church with, whatever the case may be. But the question is, and I think it's a really important question, because I think it speaks also to the idea that we want to be in relationship with people. We don't want to be in conflict. We want to be in relationship with people. And it doesn't mean that we have to all agree on every single thing. But how do you do that? How do you have a conversation with somebody whose ideas and their beliefs are so distant from your own, or your own are so distant from theirs, that it feels like you're on two different planets? This is something that's pretty common right now, from my experience anyway. And I don't think there's a nice, simple answer to that. I think there's a variety of answers to that question. So I'm going to tackle a little bit about this. And so a couple things you have to figure out right off the bat. What's the goal of the conversation? Is the goal to be right? Or is the goal to learn? Is the goal to build relationship or keep relationship? What is the goal that you have in talking with this person? Is it to convince somebody of something? Because if that's your primary goal, you're going to fail. More than likely is you're going to fail, because in this day and age, so often most people have their identity wrapped up in their beliefs. And so to criticize a belief is a criticism of the person. It becomes an attack. And when we're attacked, we automatically go into defense mode. And then we become resistant to hearing and adopting anything that anybody else could say. Logic doesn't matter when it comes to these type of things, honestly. No, but if logic mattered, Facebook would be really effective in convincing people of how the other person is right, or how I'm right, you're wrong, or you're right and I'm wrong, whatever the case may be. Because there's a ton of information out there, but nobody seems to be convinced by any of it. So maybe it's not about data, actually more harmful than helpful. So that's the first thing. What's the goal of the interaction with somebody? If your goal is to just be right, you're wasting your time. Honestly, just stop. There's no point in going on, because then it's not seeing a person. You're not seeing a person. You're seeing an issue that has to be solved. You're seeing an argument. You're seeing a debate. And that's not seeing the image of God in somebody. So that's the first thing, really important. Second is, what kind of person are you interacting with? That's really important, because not all people are the same. And what do I mean by that? I'm not talking about in a general sense of humanity. I'm talking about in the sense of, what is their relationship to you? You have different relationships in your life. How you interact with a stranger to be different than how you interact with a relative or a close friend, and how you interact with somebody in your church may be different than how you interact with somebody you work with. How you interact with somebody who is a decision maker will be different than how you interact with somebody who is just not a decision maker. I don't know what you want to call that, but you get the idea, right? And so if you approach conversation with anybody you meet in the same mindset, then that's a recipe for disaster. I will tell you that if you meet somebody and all of a sudden it goes into politics and they're a complete stranger and they're not a policymaker, or they don't have influence on the different process and all of that, that conversation is going to sound a lot different, and it should sound different than somebody who is a decision maker, who has influence, who has some kind of level of authority or power in order to make a change in whatever it is that you're interested in talking about. Those two conversations are not the same, nor should they be the same, because the goal of those conversations is different. It goes back to that first thing. But that second part is understanding who it is that you're talking with and what your relationship with that person is. Do you have an existing relationship, or is this somebody that you're just meeting for the first time? Understanding what is that relationship will allow you to adapt and adjust to be able to figure out how is that conversation going to proceed. What is the goal of that conversation? With a family member, you're stuck with these people. That's just the reality of it. Unless you're going to completely separate yourself from family and all of that, right? Again, you just got to understand the context when you're going in. Be intentional in your conversations is the idea. So what's the goal? And who am I interacting with in a relationship with them? Those are the first two things. The third thing is when you're talking about really difficult type of conversations, again, these political, religious, whatever type of conversations that we're having, the third part is to see past the issue. If all you do is stick on issues, there's going to be division, because you're going to have your facts, your information, your data that you're going to be able to draw on. And guess what? So are they. They have. So something that I've often said is that people come to conclusions for what they see are really good reasons. It doesn't matter what you think about their reasons. They have taken the time to think through some things and have come to their conclusion based on their life experience, based on different things that are happening, based on their own confirmation bias, all sorts of things. But they have reasons for why they have come to their conclusions. People don't just willy-nilly come up with whatever, just pick a topic, it doesn't matter. They don't willy-nilly come down to conclusions. They have good reasons for why they have concluded that. And so starting off with the idea that it's not about the issue, if all we focus on is the issue, then we're missing the person. And if we can't see the person that we're talking to, then we're not seeing the image of God. We can't see the image of God in somebody if we're all concerned about whether they're right or wrong. Issues are not people. People have names, they have stories, they have the ability to think. Issues have the ability to be right and wrong. And if we live in a dichotomy of right and wrong, and that's the only two options, and you're either right or you're wrong, and that's it, don't waste your time, because that is not a conversation. That's a monologue. There's a difference between a dialogue and a monologue. A monologue is, I'm going to talk at you, and it really doesn't matter what you think. I don't care, because I know I'm right and you're wrong, and you better get in line with me. That's a monologue. A dialogue is two people who have come to a conversation with the idea of, we are both going to seek the truth. And we're going to be focused on our relationship as more important than what our beliefs about whatever the subject is at hand. And so there's a very big difference in how a conversation is approached when the idea is a dialogue as opposed to a monologue. A monologue is essentially the same as talking with a wall. You get just about as far as having a monologue debate with people. And I think we've seen this, we've experienced it, I've experienced it anyway, where a conversation quickly turns into a monologue of two people just throwing things at each other like walls and not listening to understand, listening to answer and respond and combat whatever was thrown. It's a combative nature as opposed to a dialogue, which is not combative. Dialogue is seeking to understand. How did you come to that conclusion? I want to understand. the big difference is seeing an issue versus seeing a person. So there's three things, right? So you got what's the goal, what's the relationship, and are you seeing an issue or a person in this? So the other thing about this is, how do you have a conversation with somebody who you really disagree with? One of the best methods that I have found is to ask questions. I can't control what the other person is going to say, what they're going to believe, or what they're going to do. I can't control how they're going to respond. The only control that I have is what I do, and even then, it's a bit limited. When somebody attacks me or says something that is going to be offensive to me, I have a decision to make. How am I going to respond? Am I going to get irritated and upset? Well, if that's the case, then really all I'm doing is I'm handing over my emotions to that person. You get to decide how I'm going to respond. Does that mean that I accept what they're saying? Does it mean that I agree? Does it mean that I find that their arguments are truthful? No, absolutely not. It means that I have to make a decision that says, how am I going to respond? Who's in control of my response? Am I in control of my response, or am I handing that over to somebody else? Because I can tell you that as soon as I hand that over to somebody else, I've lost control. And I'm certainly not going to win an argument in that case. I'm going to get really upset. And the question becomes, what am I getting upset about? If what somebody is saying is not true, then why am I getting upset about it? Because it's false, sure. But shouldn't we really get upset about things that are really true? And then it's a question of, are we in alignment with truth? We can't determine what somebody else does. So the other thing that I wanted, there was a couple of other things, see if I can remember them now. The last part has to do with this whole idea of response, but it's asking questions. So my experience has been that when, first of all, making I statements, really important, so that way it's not an accusation to somebody else. This is what I hear you say is a good way to deal with this. And this is really important when you're dealing with folks that are on a different planet than you are when it comes to really controversial type of things. A lot of times asking questions can really lower the conflict level. It can lower the emotional level as well. So it would be asking somebody, tell me, I understand what you're saying as far as what you believe, but tell me, why do you believe that? What has brought you to that conclusion? Asking people, well, what are you afraid of? What is it that you fear in relation to this that has brought you to believe whatever it is that you believed? And then coming back and saying, okay, this is what I heard you say. Is that accurate? Did I hear that correctly? Then you have the opportunity to say, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. I can see how you would come to that conclusion. Do you mind if I share with you why I see things differently? Here's, can I share with you my experience and what has brought me to this? That's most people, the vast majority of people, if you approach a conversation that way, vast majority of people are going to say, yeah. Why are they going to say that? Because you took the time to care enough to see a person. You called them by name. You saw a person, not an issue to be solved, not a right and wrong, but you saw a person and you asked, why did you come to this conclusion? Oh, that's really interesting. You took an interest in somebody. You saw their humanity. And when you see the humanity in others and you give that humanity to others, there is a response back, usually. Not always, not 100% of the time. But again, that takes a dialogue. Two people that are willing to do this. Not everyone is willing to do that. Some people, unfortunately, are going to be locked in their monologues. Some people do not have the ability to see beyond, see the possibility that they could not have the full amount of information. They may have a situation where they're not mature enough. They may have a situation where they've been hurt probably pretty badly at some point as well. Things that we need to consider in relation to this. Why is somebody doing what they're doing? We don't know the full story about that. The other part about this is you're not obligated to have a conversation. You may be tired. You have your own story as well. You may be tired. You may be really upset over something. I can tell you, if you're really in some kind of situation where your emotions can get out of hand, not a good idea to have an exchange about something really controversial, because you're not the fullness of who you are at that point. And so I would just probably say walk away, and that's okay to do. Don't respond. Don't get pulled in. It doesn't matter if you lose an argument. Honestly, it doesn't matter if you lose an argument. That's the biggest thing, right? Who cares if you lose an argument? There's no prizes being given out if you win an argument. There's no extra money. There's no, unless you're on a debate club. But in general, in life, losing an argument can also save a relationship. Being willing to lose an argument means that you care about that relationship so much more than being right. Being right, it's fine, but it's an issue. It's impersonal. It doesn't matter, ultimately. Especially if we can't actually change a situation, then it really doesn't matter whether we're right or wrong. Not because being right and wrong are unimportant, but because they don't have that much of an influence on making an actual change. The other part of this is when we act in this way, we are showing grace and mercy. So the definition of grace and mercy is grace is giving something to somebody that does not deserve it. And mercy is withholding that which they do deserve. So grace and mercy are the opposite of karma. Karma is getting what you deserve. And so if somebody attacks you, what do they deserve? They deserve to be attacked in response. But when somebody attacks you or your ideas or your beliefs or says things that they may be trying to get a response, to get you to have an irrational response, an angry response, and you don't respond in kind, you're offering grace and mercy to somebody. And the benefit of offering grace and mercy to somebody, no matter how misguided, no matter how much they're trying to poke and push buttons, is, again, you're changing the tone. You're changing the tone from an issue to a person. You're finding out, why is this person in pain? Why are they lashing out? What's the cycle that has caused this? You're also setting the tone for, this is the way that we're going to have a conversation. This is the way I'm going to have a conversation. What you do with it is your business. I can't control you. But I am going to follow this way because this is what a part of my core belief is. It's changing from what the world offers to what we're called to live into. That is not easy to do. None of this is easy to do. It takes practice. It takes a lot of practice to do this, to allow people to make comments that normally you would want to respond to, either with anger or throwing data or whatever the case may be. I'm just going to tell you, those conversations don't go anywhere. They're not fruitful. They're not productive. They don't enhance a relationship. They don't lead anywhere. They just leave people angry. And that's not what we're called to. Yes, does that mean we're all going to be perfect at this? Nope, absolutely not. There are times that I fall into this, plenty of times, especially when I'm tired or I just don't feel like putting up with it. The idea is to try and catch myself so I don't fall into this. And I remember that when I have conversations that I follow these things, they go so much better. And the benefit long term is that that person knows that even though I may not agree with them, I see them as a person, I care about them. That's what matters the most. People don't care. There's a phrase, right? People don't care what you think until they know that you care. And so you'll be invited to actually offer an opinion, to offer what your belief is to somebody, as opposed to getting into an argument and thrusting your belief into a situation. That's a far better situation to be invited into conversation, invited to share your ideas and beliefs, rather than having them being a weapon that's thrust into a conversation. So that's our tough topic. It's not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I would encourage you to practice. If you need a practice partner, I'm happy to do that with you. You can pick pick the most controversial topic that you can imagine, whatever's most controversial to you. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. And I'll do my best to try and follow what I'm saying. I don't promise that I'm going to be perfect, but hopefully in the midst of this, if we're intentional about it, we can then talk about how did that go? What was that like? Those type of things. I welcome your comments, your thoughts. What has worked for you? I want to know what has worked for you as far as having difficult conversations on very controversial topics, regardless of where in the world they are. It's helpful for me to hear what has worked for you, and so please share those in the comment section. All right, I hope you have a blessed week, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.